With the help of Hashem, we are learning Sukah, Daf, Nun, Vav. We are making, God willing, the Siyum today on Masechta Sukah. We are dedicating this class and the Siyum Le'ilui Nishmas Rabdoiv Nelkin and Yebada L'chaim Toivim Aruchim to his wife Miriam. We are humbled by the fact that Rabdoiv, towards the end of his life, even though he was visually impaired, he would sit and learn with us every day, as well as his dedication, the dedication of his wife Miriam, by sitting and helping him learn and continuing to learn with us. Hashem should bless you, that it should be fulfilled, as we say, Harachman Hu Yakim, for you and for all of us, as Sukas David HaNefalas. Amen. We left off on Daf Nun Vav Amid Aleph, 7 lines from the top of the Amid. The Gemara is going to begin today with a very practical machloikas concerning how we formulate, how we order the Kiddush the first night of Sukkot. And the question is, whether are we going to make the bracha leishiv basukah first, or whether we're going to make the shehecheyanu first. And this will be linked, as the Gemara will explain, to a similar, perhaps similar machloikas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Bechlal, how is the formulation and the order of Kiddush every Friday night? And the question is, do you make the bracha of the Kiddush first? Do you make Kiddush HaYom first, the Mekadosh HaShabbos first, and then the Boder Pri HaGofen? Or do you do it the way we actually paskin, that first you make the Boder Pri HaGofen, and then you make the bracha on the Kiddush, on the wine? We're going to go back to the Mishnah's statement that during the Yomim Tovim, the Lechem Apanim was divided by all of the 24 Mishmarais, and that's when Shabbos falls out on Yontif. And we're going to continue with that discussion as what would to happen if Yontif doesn't fall out on Shabbos, but if Yontif falls out immediately prior or immediately after Shabbos, or if there's a one-day break. And the point will be is that when the Kohanim from other Mishmarais needed to be in the Beis HaMikdash, then they will also merit to participate in the division of the Lechem Apanim. If they did not need to be there, even though they came early to be there, so to say, not to be under pressure. So then we'll see whether they still divided in the Lechem Apanim or not, and that's going to lead us into the discussion that on a regular Shabbos, amongst how many Mishmarais was the Lechem Apanim divided. Now, normally the rule will be that all of these Karbanos and whatever part of it which goes to the Kohanim is divided only to the Mishmar of that week. However, being that there was a change of guard every Shabbos, in other words, the Mishmar, the watch would change during Shabbos, both of them needed to be there. So Bechlal Lechem Apanim was divided by those two Mishmarais. In other words, the Mishmar, that the incoming Mishmar and the outgoing Mishmar, but there's going to be a Machloikas Tanoim. How were they divided? Do we divide it 6-6? There were 12 lechem panim breads, 6 and 6, or as we see, the Tana Rabbi Yehuda will hold that the division was 7-5, and we'll see why was it divided so. And we're going to ultimately be learning about the Mishmar that is called Bilga, because the original family member from whom we made this group was called Bilga. The Mishmar of Bilga was penalized 3 ways. We'll see as to why did that happen, and God willing, we're going to share a very powerful siyum of the Rebbe that the Rebbe gave on Vav Tishrei Tavshin Lamed Hey concerning this final story, which explains as to why they were penalized and a whole beautiful different way of viewing this story, Chevre, and much, much more. Let us start on Daf Nun Vav again, Amid Aleph, 7 lines from the top of the Amid by the 2 dots, Ba'ad Seres. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niveh b'dvarim. The Mishnah says that during Shavuos, Oimer Loi, the Kohen, right, who's distributing the portions to the Kahanim, and as we mentioned, on Shavuos, when it's on Shabbos, all of the 24 Mishmarais take part of both the Lechem Apanim and the Shtei HaLechem, which comes together with the Kivsei Atzeres. The Shtei HaLechem was uniquely the only carbon sibur in the Beis HaMikdash that was actually chametz. The Lechem Apanim was dafka matzah, like almost mamish all else in the Beis HaMikdash. And the Mishnah says that the Kohen would tell them, to every Kohen, hey lech matzah, hey lech chametz. Take matzah, which is the Lechem Apanim, and hey chametz, which is the Shtei HaLechem. And what the Gemara will focus on is on the order of the Mishnah. First, the Koyanim were given the matzah, the lechem apanim. Then they were given the chametz. Then they were given the shtei halechem. Why is it ordered that way? That will be the following topic. But before we come back to this statement in the Mishnah, we're going to go, like we mentioned in the introduction, to the question of to what is the seder, what is the order of the blessings, of the brachas that we make Kiddush, the first night of Sukkot. In the Sukah, Itmer was stated, Rav Amar, Sukah v'achar kach zman, that the order is first when we recite the Kiddush. After the Kiddush, we're going to make the bracha over the Sukah. Right, and the final bracha will be the bracha of Shehechiyanu. Chevra, actually, that's the way we do it on the first night of Sukkah. Is the advantage of doing it that way, just to speak out right away, the end will be that since we don't make a Shehechiyanu when we build the Sukkah, the Shehechiyanu that we are making on the first night of Sukkot is really a double Shehechiyanu, or it's one Shehechiyanu for two different things. It's for the Yom Tov, it's a new Yom Tov, and we are also making it on the Sukkah. So when we first evoke Sukkah, and then you make Shehechiyanu, it further clarifies that indeed the Shehechiyanu is for both. That is the way we do it, but let's come back to the beginning. So says Rav. However, Rabba Bar Bar Chana says the opposite. First you make a Shehechiyanu, and then you make the bracha leishav asuk. Explains the Gemara the argument. Rav Amar Sukah v'archakach zman farvos. So here it's about chiyuva the yoyme adif. The obligation of the day takes precedence. Today it's Sukkot. So first mention that it's Sukkah. Rabba Bar Bar Chana says zman. First you make a shechiyanu and then you make the bracha on the Sukkah. Because when it comes to picking and choosing different values that are leading you in different directions, what will trump over all else? The rule that tadir v'she'ena tadir, when you have two things in front of you, one is more frequent relatively to the other one that's less frequent, the more frequent takes precedence. And therefore, since the bracha shechiyanu is said more frequently, shechiyanu is said on every Yom Tov, plus for many other seasonal new things that evoke a certain amount of joy and celebration. So Shechiyanu is a very frequent bracha. The bracha of Sukkah is only said 7 days a year. Now, Chevre, there is a counter value. The counter value is that chiyuva diyoyma adif. In other words, everyone subscribes to Tadir v'she'ena Tadir. Basically, what Rav is saying is that, on one hand, you have Tadir v'she'ena Tadir. On the other hand, you have this concept of that the obligation of the day takes precedence. And Rav is putting that above Tadir v'she'ena Tadir. So now, says the Gemara, Lema, should we say that this argument between Rav and Rabba Bar Bar Chana is similar to the machlokes that we find earlier by Tanoim, which is actually the machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, Kol Miflegi Chevra, the first wide line. And now we are reviewing that which we learned in Brachas, that which we reviewed again in Psachim, the Tanach Rabbanan, that the Varim Shebein Beis Shammai leBeis Hillel b'Seuda, regarding the matters of machlokes, the matters of dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel as to items, halachas connected to a meal. So we have the following argument: Beis Shammai yoimrim, when it comes to Kiddush, Friday night, first mevarach al hayoim, the first bracha will be what we call the mekadesh hashabas. Chavra, let's put aside the yom hashishi, okay, which is like the intro. But aside of that, we have the bracha of mekadesh hashabas, which is made first, and then you make the boire pri hagafen, and then you drink the wine. So holds Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel oiminim, which is what we paskin, that first you make the boire pri hagafen, mevarach al hayayin, and then mevarach al hayim, and then you make the bracha of Kiddush. And now let's explain what's underlying their argument. Beis Shammai oiminim mevarach. Interestingly, Beis Shammai gives not one. Beis Shammai gives two opinions. First, two reasons. First reason is shahayoim goyrem liyayin shiyavoy. The day causes for wine to be brought. Now, hold a second. We drink wine during the week, but we drink wine during the meal. Why are we drinking wine before the meal, which is exactly when we make Kiddush? That's because it's Shabbos. Since it's Shabbos, you have to make Kiddush on wine before you begin the meal. So Beseder, so since the day is the cause for wine to come now, So acknowledge the day first, Gavaldik, Kiddush, Mekadesh HaShabbos, and then make the bracha over the wine. Reason number 2, Ukvar Kiddush Hayoim Vadayin Yayin Leiba. In other words, the holiness of the day, the Kiddush of Shabbos began when it got dark, right? Actually, it began with Shkia. And actually, Tois Shabbos, ideally, we should take it in a little bit before Shkia. So since the arrival of the Kedusha of Shabbos or of Yontif precedes us going and sitting down at the table, so if the Kedusha of the day came to us before we even began the wine, began the meal, so when it comes to the order of the brachas, make the bracha Mekadesh HaShabbos and then make the bracha over the wine. These are the 2 reasons of Bishal. Now, Beis Hillel, who's going to counter, will also give 2 reasons to counter 2-2. Beis Hillel, no, the order is first you make the Boire Priyagofen, the way we do it, and then you make the bracha of Kiddush. Why? Reason number 1 of Beis Hillel, Shahayayin Goyrem Likidusha Shetayamar. Wine is what causes Kiddush to be said. In other words, if you would not have wine, you would not make Kiddush. Now, Chevra, we know that you say words of Kiddush in the Shemona Esrei, we know that. Another detail we spoke this out when we learned brachas, that really if a person doesn't have wine, bread can substitute the wine. But you need to have bread. In other words, the whole reason why you are making Kiddush right now in the beginning of the meal is only because you have wine or its substitute. So therefore, make the bracha over the wine first. Now, don't forget, Beis Shammai gave 2 reasons, so Beis Hillel has to counter with 2 reasons. Davar Acher, another reason, and here we go, because since Birchas Hayayin Tadira, the blessings of a wine is more frequent, you make a bracha over wine every time you have wine. Now, we're not speaking about drinking wine that's reshus, we're speaking about mitzvah drinking wine. Wine isn't only used for Kiddush, Chevra, it's used for Havdalah, right? It's used for Sheva brachas, it's used for benching, for Birchas Hayam Mazin, for Zimun. And Birchas Hayoim, the bracha over today, is not as frequent as all of the various mitzvahs that we say dafka over a cup of wine, ein atadira. So says Beis Hillel, this rule trumps all others. This value will tip the scale. So now, says now Beis Shammai again also will subscribe to the concept of tadav v'she'ein tadir. Elama, when there is another value going in the opposite direction, that will be more important than tadav v'she'ein tadir. Very similar, l'chu'ura, the Gemara is suggesting to the machlokes Rav and Abba Bar Chana. So shall we say, lema, that Rav holds like Beis Shammai? In other words, the obligation of the day, mamish, takes precedence over that which is more frequent, which is taka why Rav holds that you make the bracha over the sukkah. The obligation of the day takes precedence. Like Beis Shammai, the bracha Mekadesh HaShabbos, or, by the way, same thing by Yom Tiv, the Kadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim takes precedence over the bracha over wine, even though the blessings on wine is tadav v'she'ein tadir. So, says and Rabbi Bar Chana holds like Beis Hillel. Rabbi Bar Chana holds like Beis Hillel that what tadav v'she'ein tadir is that which will trump all other values. Says the Gemara Amalach Rav. No, I will hold even like Beis Hillel. At kan like Amr Beis Hillel Hasam Elo. That shahayoim goyrem likidusha shatayamer. Indeed, if not for the wine, like we mentioned, Kiddush will not be said. That's why when it comes to the Kiddush Friday night, when it comes to the Kiddush Yom Tov night, wine is more significant. But over here, one is not contingent on the other. Ilav zman, which means if you won't say the shechiyanu, what mi lo yomrin on Sukah, will you not make the bracha over Sukah? Of course you will. Of course you will. Gavaldik. And the same thing can be said in the opposite. Rabbi Bar Chana Amir Lach, Another Amir Afilu Beis Shammai. At kan loy Amr Beis Shammai Hasam Elo. That what? That shahayoim goyrem liyayin shiyavei. Like we explained, why are you having wine before the meal? Only because of the day, because it's Shabbos. So then acknowledge Shabbos first. Aval hachabar over here. Ilaf Sukah. If a person is not in the sukkah, let's speak about a person who's not in the sukkah. Beheted. A person is not in the sukkah, they're traveling person is not on a sukkah, there was a gzeiras hamalchus, God forbid. There's religious persecution. You would have to make shayachiyanu. So therefore, you can argue that each one can hold of the other. Now, why are we discussing this over here? Because of the intro, because of the case of the Mishnah, of the Seder that the Mishnah mentions, how the Kohen would distribute both the lechem upon him and the shtei halechem. So asks the, and this will make a kasha, this will pose a challenge against Rav. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Ba'at said us on Shavuos. Oimer loi, the Kohen that's distributing these portions, will tell to each recipient Kohen, hey loch matzah, here take matzah, matzah meaning lechem upon him, not chametz. And hey lechametz, the shtei halechem, which one came first? The lechem upon him. Now chevra, today is Shavuos. In other words, the mitzvahs hayoim, mamish, is the shtei halechem. V'ha'achid, the chametz, is going to be ikir. That's the obligation of today. Matzah, we're going to argue, can be considered tafel. Why tafel? Now, the word tafel is it means it's only like secondary. Why is it tafel? So Rashi explains, because the lechem hapanim bread that was distributed on this Shabbos to the Kohanim, when was it baked? When was it placed on the table? In other words, when was it used, the iked, for the mitzvah? If we're going to view that the mitzvah part of the lechem hapanim is when it was given to God, last Shabbos. So explains Rashi. Yet true, in order to put the new lechem upon him, you have to remove the old, and now the kohanim get to eat it after the bozich, after the frankincense is offered on the mizbeach. But the Gemara is viewing now, at least, that since the lechem upon him breads were put on the table last Shabbos, so this Shabbos it's considered tafel. It's considered secondary. So you have chametz, ikir, you have matzah that's tafel, yet, what does the Mishnah say? What was given first? What is spoken about first? Heilach matzah and heilach chametz. And why would that be? The answer must be because tadir v'she'eino tadir. Tadir v'she'eino tadir will trump what Rav said, chiyuva d'yoyma. Chiyuva d'yoyma shtei halechem. Tadir v'she'eino tadir is even more powerful. So will this not make a refutation to Yufta de Rav Gevaldik Amalach Rav? Says Rav, indeed, looking our Mishnah's order would refute my opinion. Happens to be that what our Mishnah said is only one Tana, and there is a machlokes Tanoim. And I have the right to opine like the other Tana. The other Tana is Abba Shol, who goes in the opposite Seder. That when the Kohen would distribute both the lechem upon him and the shtei halechem, it would be in the opposite order. First, he would give out the shtei halechem. Why? Because that's today's mitzvah. And only then would he give the matzah, even though matzah is more frequent. Tanoi, the Tanya, like our Seder, Halach, first matzah, first the lechem upon him was distributed, and then Halach chametz, and then he gave out the shtei halechem. However, Abba Shol Omer, Halach chametz, Halach matzah. Now what's very important to note is that even though Rav is not refuted because he has the right to choose the shita of Abba Shol, but we normally have a rule that we paskin like a Stam Mishnah. And the way we're learning our Gemara, halachically we should not follow Rav. We do follow Rav. And you know why we follow Rav? Because the premise of the Gemara's question, that matzah is called tafel, the emes is, we don't view it that way. We don't view it that way because when it comes to the avodah, to the service in the Beis HaMikdash, and this is a theme that we have a lot in Chassidus, normally it sounds like whatever we offer on the altar, that's the pinnacle of our service. In Al-Pi Kabbalah, Al-Pi Chassidus, what the Kohanim eat afterwards is the pinnacle of the service. Even that which is poured on the Mizbeach, just using the words in Kabbalah, it's connected to the Avodah of Birurim. And when we say that Achilas, that the Kohanim oichlim, and Vahabalim mischaprim, that there's the kapara through the eating of the Kohanim, that's because the Avodah of the eatings of a tzaddik is even greater than Achilas Mizbeach. It's beyond Avodah Sabirurim, it's connected to the Avodah of Yechudim. These are the words in Kabbalah. And based on that, you can argue that it's not the chametz ikir and matzah tafel. Matzah is just as ikir, dafke, because it's distributed amongst the kohanim. So says the final Tosfos in the Amid. Well, let's go weiter in the Gemara. When he gave a drasha, he did not paskin like Rav. the Amar Sukah v'achakach zman. He paskined like the second opinion that we learned today, Rabba Bar Chana, that first you make the Shechayanu and then you make the Sukkah, even the first night of Sukkahs. Rav Sheshes Berei de Ravidi Amar Sukah v'achakach zman, which is like Rav, and indeed paskins the Gemara v'hilchasa Sukah v'achakach zman, like we just quoted the bottom Tosfos. Look, just to end, Inami Upa. Just a second.
Recording in progress.
All right, Chevra, we are in the same place over here. We had a shtickle drop of the computer, but we're back up over here. So as we were quoting from Tosfos, the end of the last Tosfos in the Amid, Inami chashiv nami lechem apanim choivas hayoim afa pishehem mishabe sha'avra. And again, we can understand the Tosfos al pi Chasidis. Not only it's also called choivas hayoim, because when the kohanim eat the lechem apanim, we are fulfilling the highest level of avodah, even more than the putting it on the shulchan. Okay, back inside the Gemara by the two dots, Mishnah says that Mishmar shezmanoi kavua chuli v'shar korbanos simur. No, it's the point the Mishnah made is that when do we say that all of the 24 groups of all of the Mishmaris partake in Yom Tiv? That's only in the korbanos that are uniquely connected to Yom Tiv. But as the Mishnah said, that which is brought every day, that's brought every day. The nedarim and the nedavis that are brought on Chol HaMoed, that only goes to that mishmer of that week. And then the Mishnah gave those two final clauses that have to be explained. So the second to last clause was, the Mishnah says that the mishmer of that week, they partake in the other korbanos tzibur. Only the mishmer of the week. What is that referring to? Says the Gemara, lasuye mai lasuye, both the par helam davar shel tzibur and the seiras averes kechavim. That's what we learned in Masechta Hoyriyos. In other words, that if you have the Sanhedrin that give a erroneous halachic ruling regarding a prohibition, which normally if one would violate it b'mezid, they'll be chayv kares, which normally means b'shoigeg chayv chatos, and they said that a detail of that may be done when it really may not be done. Then they realized they made a mistake, and the majority of the kahal actually did it. We don't say every individual should bring a carbon chatos, but the community, the Sanhedrin, has to bring this bull for a chatos. So if that is going to be brought chevra on Chol HaMoed, it's not brought on Yom Tov. If it's brought on Chol HaMoed, then the meat of the chatos, or if God forbid it was concerning avodah zarah, it was a mistake regarding a detail of idol service, there is also the he-goat. All of that is only given to the mishmer of the week. And the final statement in the Mishnah, for who makriv, right? U makriv es hakoil. Interestingly, there's a different version in the Gemara than we have it in the Mishnah with the words v'hu. Okay, no, it's this watch, only the watch of the week. What is that referring to? The famous dessert. So you had a fund, and whenever the altar was idle, for it not to remain altar, money would be taken from that fund, and the carbon oil would be brought. I know that carbon oil is completely burnt up. No, but the hides, the hide of the oil is given to the mishmer of the week. It's given only to the mishmer of that week, and not divided amongst all the 24 groups. And now our Mishnah, which will be the final Mishnah of the Masechta, is really going to give continuity to the theme of the previous Mishnah, and we are focusing back to the Lechem Apanim, as we explained, which is the exception. Lechem Apanim is not uniquely connected to Yom Tiv, but because of the pasuk that we quoted at the end of Lamed Nun Hey Amud Beis, on top of Nun Vav Amud Aleph, that Lechem Hapanim is also divided amongst all the 24 groups when Shabbos is on Yom Tiv. Now the question will be, what happens if Shabbos and Yom Tiv are not together, but one is immediately prior or after the other? What happens if one is near the other? What happens if you have kohanim from other mishmaros that came early to Yerushalayim, because on Yom Tov they all have to be there? When do we say that they have the right to take a portion from the Lechem Apanim? And when do we say that no, that you didn't need to be here and it's not going to be given to you as well? So says our Mishnah, this is the rule. When you have a Yom Tov that's mamish samach l'Shabbos, that's immediately touching Shabbos, bein melefaneh, whether it's prior, it's Friday, we'll see, is the last day of Yom Tov. So they needed to be their Yom Tov. They are theoretically allowed to go home. We're not allowed to travel on Yom Tov nor on Shabbos. So they are still on the Beis HaMikdash. Or if Yom Tov is la'achareha, it's immediately on Sunday, which would mean, as Gemara will clarify, that the first day of Yom Tov is on Sunday. Since all of the Kohanim have to be in the Beis HaMikdash over Yom Tov, so they have to be there on Shabbos. So here also, Hoyu Kolam Shmarei Shavos, as we had in the previous Mishnah, that all of them will take their part of the Lechem Apanim, which is very logical, even though it's not Yom Tov Shabbos, but they needed to be there. However, if there is a 1 day interval, so again, the last day of Yom Tov was Thursday, they didn't want to go home on Friday. Many people don't like traveling on Friday, just in case. Or if the new Yom Tov is coming in on Monday, they could have arrived on Sunday, but they don't want to feel rushed. So they opted to come earlier or to stay later. So they will get, but not as much as, says our Mishnah, Mishmar shezmanoi kavua, the Mishmar who normally would have gotten that week, and Kan hamakim, to mention that really the Lechem Apanim is not divided by one Mishmar. Since these watches change in middle of Shabbos, so every week 2 Mishmaros have to be in the Beis HaMikdash over Shabbos. So it's always divided amongst 2 Mishmaros. The Lechem Apanim is divided amongst 2, not amongst 24, but amongst 2. So says our Mishnah that these 2 Mishmaros, let's go with the opinion that every week from the 12 breads, it's 6 and 6. 6 to the incoming, 6 to the outgoing. Being that you have kohanim, many kohanim from many different groups, even though there's 1 day interval, but still they stayed on longer or they came a little bit earlier, they should get some of it. So how do you do it? 10 is going to be given for the weekly mishmar. Really, that means 5 and 5. 5 to the incoming, 5 to the outgoing. And Vahamis Akev, the ones who stayed behind, and similarly the ones that came early, they are the ones that will get Shtayim. 2 of the 12 will be divided all amongst them. How is it every single week? Says our Mishnah. Again, it's not that the Lechem Apanim is only divided by 1 watch. It's not correct. 2 watches have to be in the Beis HaMikdash. The incoming takes 6, and the outgoing takes 6. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no, that the incoming actually takes 7. And the outgoing only takes 5. It's not divided equally, and the Gemara will explain why. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say that? Now continues the Mishnah, the watch that is incoming, they will divide and consume their lechem apanim in the more prominent area in the Azara courtyard, which is in the north. As we know that many karbanis, the karbanis on the highest category of holy of holies, of Kodesh Kachim, must be slaughtered in the north. So we clearly mark, it should be apparent, these are the incoming ones. They make their division in the northern part of the Azara. The Hayotzim and the outgoing watch, they will make their division of the Lechem Apanim Dafka in the Darim. Now, says the Mishnah, from the 24 watches, and those who learned Rashi on their own in the Mishnah Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis, in the Gemara Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis, we went through their names. Right? We mentioned that the first watch was Yehoyariv. The last watch's name, this is all on the patriarch of the family, was Bilga. And as we'll see over here, that for a reason the Gemara will discuss. The mishmar of Bilga was penalized 3 different ways. Beginning with the first, Bilga, the watch known as Bilga, Lo'olam Chelekas Bedarim. They only will get their part, their portion of the Lechem Apanim in the Darim, in the southern part of the Azara, making it clear that they're not being treated with the same honor as everyone else. Number 2, Vitabata Kavua. There were 24 rings in the area of the slaughter part of the Mitpachayim in the Azara. There were 24 rings because there was one ring that was actually connected to each mishmar. It's not that they couldn't share from the others, but every mishmar had their own ring. These rings, if you have a picture, when an animal needs to be slaughtered, especially larger animals, it's not so simple to slaughter an animal. So if you have a proper ring, you can lay the animal down, you can stick its neck through a ring, you can close the ring, trapping the animal and the neck in a place, and then you shecht it. In order to place the animal there, the ring has to be opened. You put the animal in there, you close the ring. They, at a certain point, we'll see, they permanently close the ring that was specifically designated to the Bilga Mishmar. Basically, they were unable to use it. They always needed to use other rings. And again, another penalty. And penalty number 3, v'chaloinas asuma. So there were certain windows or certain shelves. Rashi reminds us exactly where it was. The second to last line, or the last line in Rashi, that you had shelves in which you would store the slaughter knives, the chalifs. And the chalifos in the plural, and the area that was previously designated for the knives of the Bilga Mishmar was completely closed off. They were unable to use it. Again, they needed to use the space designated for others. So these are the 3 penalties. They never got the lechem upon them in the north. They only got it in the south. That the ring that they had was made unusable for them, and the storage location for their chalifos, for the chalif knives, was also completely closed off. Now, before we come back to the last part of the Mishnah, about Bilga, the Mishmar of Bilga, when the Mishnah said in the beginning that if Shabbos is immediately next to Yom Tov, prior or post, before or after, what does that mean? Means Yom Tov Rishon, the first day of Yom Tov is on Friday. Can't be, because guys, if the first day of Yom Tov, it means Yom Tov begins on Friday, so then Shabbos will also be Yom Tov. If the Mishnah means la'achareh, that Sunday is the last day of Yom Tov, well, if Sunday is the last day of Yom Tov, then Shabbos is the second to last day of Yom Tov. Then Shabbos is on Yom Tov. Hainu Shabbos shebetoich hachag. And we already learned that in the previous Mishnah, that all of the 24 groups take a part equally in the Lechem Hapanim. Elo, the case of the Mishnah must be, the novelty, the Chiddush is, Lefaneo means, the way we said, Yom Tov Achrein, the last day of Yom Tov is on Friday. Shabbos is no longer Yom Tov. When the Mishnah gave the case of La'achareh, it means that Yom Tov Rishon, that the first day of Yom Tov began after Shabbos, the first day of Yom Tov began on Sunday. Shabbos is Erev Yom Tov, Shabbos is not Yom Tov. So that's the novelty of the Mishnah. Nevertheless, the Lechem Hapanim was divided by everyone, by Tama, because Kivan Dahani Mekadmi Vahani Ma'achri, since they needed to be there, whether it's before or after. In other words, you can't travel on Shabbos on Yom Tov. So all of the Kahanim are there because they need to be there for Yom Tov. So Tiknu, Rabbanan, Milsa, the Chachamim enacted, Ki Heicha Denechlu Bahadi Adadi, that they should be able to partake as if equal to when Shabbos and Yom Tov fall on the same day. Now, I just want to remind everyone that we had on Yuma Daf Lamed Tes that God Almighty did give a special blessing in the Lechem Hapanim bread, and that is that even when you ate a very small amount, even less than a kazayis, you felt satisfied, you felt satiated. So it's beautiful that the quantity really was of no significance, because quality trumps quantity, and in the Holy Temple in a very revealed and miraculous way. Okay. Chal Yom Echad. The next case in the Mishnah was if there was 1 day interval, then only those who stayed behind got from 2, and the 10 were divided amongst all others. And then the Mishnah went on to say, and on a regular Shabbos, you did have 2 watches, 2 mishmaros. So the Lechem Hapanim was divided amongst both of them. So here we had the argument in the Mishnah. Tanakama holds 6 and 6, fair. And Rabbi Yehuda said 7 and 5, that the incoming got 2 more than the outgoing. And the question is why? So the Gemara's question is according to the Tanach Rabbi Yehuda. V'hani tartem, right? 7 to the nichnas, 7 to the incoming. Maya v'ditayu, why are they getting it? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, says Rabbi Yitzchak, Bischar hagofas delosais, in compensation for them closing the gates in the temple courtyard. In the morning, we began the day by opening the gates. The ones who opened the gate was from the outgoing mishmar. They will not be completing this task. So it looks like the incoming is doing something that's really not for them to do. The truth is, it is for them to do because it is the Seder that we enacted. This is the order, that the ingoing, that there's an exchange of guard in middle of Shabbos. So the outgoing are no longer there. They no longer have the merit to complete the task. It doesn't matter. Bottom line is that when you begin a task and you don't complete it, the ones who complete it are viewed like they're doing some of your work. So to compensate the fact that they're closing the gates, they ended up getting a totality of 2 more than the ones that are outgoing. Now the counter will be that the same thing will happen to them next week. Next week, they will open the gates in the morning. They will be, they're going to leave. There's going to be yet a new incoming group. So asks the Gemara, the name alay, dal bedal. Dal means remove. Remove. In other words, let everyone get equal every week. It looks like I'm owed 2 extra. Fine, remove it from me this week. I won't get 2 extra. But next week, I will get. In other words, do every week 6 and 6. Why are you getting now 7 and next week 5? Why would you not prefer to get every week equal? So Amar Abaye, from here we see this concept that butzina, that a small vegetable, a small gourd, a small pumpkin now is better mikara than a larger pumpkin later. So if there's a pumpkin that's growing and someone tells you, you want it now? Or you want it next week? Next week it's going to be larger. Many times people say, I don't know what's going to happen next week. I don't know if I'm going to be here. I don't know if you're going to be here. I don't know if the gourd is going to be here. Let me take what I could right now. So even though them getting 7 now in compensation will be something that they're really going to have to pay back next week, they would prefer to get more now, even though they're going to get less later. Amar Rav Yehuda adds the Amoira, a detail that was not mentioned in the Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that the lechem upon him every week was divided amongst both mishmaris. Says Rav Yehuda on that same logic that the musafin, that the musav offerings of Shabbos, just like the lechem upon him. Now the musafim of Shabbos are oila. So what? The hides of a oila go to the kahanim of that mishmar. Since again Shabbos Kodesh is a day where you have this changing over of the guards. You have the ingoing and you have the outgoing. They also divide in the hides. It's not given only to the ones that offer it, as we'll see in a moment. It's given to both mishmaris. Wow. Says the Gemara, Meisvei Azoy, it says in a Braisa, that Mishmara Hayoit says, let's go exactly, when did they change guard? When did the Mishmar leave and the new one take over? Mishmara Hayoit says, the outgoing Mishmar, they would do the morning, Tamid Shel Shachar, they would bring the Musaf. In other words, l'chayra, you would think that if they brought it, they would get the hides exclusively. Mishmara nichneses, and then the incoming Mishmar would take over with the Tamid Shel Beinu Arbaim, and also, we're going out of order, the offering of the 2 spoons which were on the Shulchan, after which you are allowed to divide the Lechem Apanim. Now the Lechem Apanim was divided by both groups. But the point that the Mishnah, that the Gemara is making over here, is that this Braisa did not mention that Musaf is divided by 2 Mishmaris, which is a Chiddush. And that needed to be mentioned. So the Gemara is going to want to learn from the fact that the Braisa omitted that, from its omission, does that not prove that we don't divide it? And what do? We give it to the Mishmar that did the carbon, which is the outgoing Mishmar. So says the Gemara, you can't prove from such a omission because this Tana is not mentioning any division. In other words, had the Tana mentioned the division of the Lechem Apanim and omitted the division of the of the Musaf, that would be a great proof. It didn't mention anything. So asks Rashi, a bomba kasha. If the Tana does speak about Chalukah and omits the Musaf, that's a raya that it's not divided by both. So we're back to our problem. Our Mishnah spoke about the division of the Lechem Apanim, and our Mishnah never spoke about the division of Musaf. Rashi asked this question, and Rashi says, beautiful. Let's not forget the context of our Mishnah. Yes, Rashi spoke about the division of the Lechem Apanim, but that was only because the previous Mishnah, the second to last Mishnah in the Masechta, was speaking about that which is divided amongst all of the 24 groups. Shabbos on Yom Tiv. Even the Lechem Apanim is divided amongst the 24 groups. Our theme is about the Lechem Apanim. So our Mishnah not focusing on anything else proves nothing. The Braisa, however, is not speaking about things being divided amongst all the 24 groups. And when it's not divided all amongst the 24 groups, this Braisa is speaking about exactly when was the guard changed over. When did the outgoing actually go out? When did the incoming actually come in? That's why the Havamina was that since the Braisa didn't mention it, is a raya that it's not divided, but still b'chalukah lo'mayda. Amar Rava, hold on, I will refute Rav Yehuda, because of Tana devei Shmuel, the Braisa that was taught in the yeshiva of Shmuel. Again, speaking about the outgoing watch, the incoming watch. There, the Maida b'chalukah, he does mention that Tana, that version does speak about the division, does address the matter. And nevertheless, u'b'musafim cholkin loik taneh. So from its omission, that should refute Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Yehuda, now where do we have the Braisa, the Tana devei Shmuel? Mishmar hayoytzeis, like we had above. The outgoing watch, oisataman shal shachar, and they make the musaf. Mishmar hanechneses, oisataman shal ben arbayim ubazichin. And now we add a detail that we did not have above. Va'arba kayhanim hoyu nechnasim sham. There were 4 kayhanim that would enter there, meaning the azara. Shnayim mishmar zu, 2 from the outgoing, 2 from the incoming, and v'cholkim lechem apanim. So here the Braisa mentioned about the division of the Lechem Apanim, ve'ilu b'musafim cholkim loik tani. Indeed, oy bazoi, tiyufta, the Rav Yehuda tiyufta, that the Mishmarais don't divide the hides of the Musaf. It's given dafke to the ones who bring it, and who brings the Musaf? The Mishmar that is outgoing. Then the Mishnah mentioned like this, as a rule, that hanechnasim, the incoming Mishmar, they would have the Lechem Apanim apportioned to them in the northern part of the Azara. And Tanur Rabbanan hanechnasim cholkim b'tzafin. Why? Kedei sheyeirou, for it to be apparent for themselves and for others. Shehem nechnasim v'hayoytzim cholkim b'darim kedei sheyeirou shehem yoytzim. And who was the exception to that rule? The Mishmar known as the Bilga Mishmar. That Bilga, la'olam chelakas bedarim. And as the Mishnah gave the other 2 penalties, and now we will learn why were they penalized. So Tanur Rabbanan. And it happened because of one member of the Bilga watch. Maisa b'Miriam bas Bilga. The second to last narrow line. That tragically, Shehemira Dasa, she became an apostate. She's the worst thing in the world. And on top of that, she married a goy, she married an officer from the nation that was oppressing us. The end of the world, times 2. And on top of that, so this obviously happened in the times of Matisyahu ben Yechon and Kohen Gadol. She entered with them. She entered the Heichal, not betara. She entered the Heichal with our enemies. And not only that, the Midrash says that the Yevanim then entered the Heichal to put on the Mizbeach a davar acher, just for the sake of clarity that we're going to sacrifice a pig to defile the holy temple. And Hoysa, when she walked by the altar, the Mizbeach, Hoysa miva'etes besandala. She kicked with her sandal. She banged with her sandal on the Mizbeach. And she called out to the Mizbeach, Lukus, Lukus. Lukus means a wolf. She called the Mizbeach a wolf because a wolf preys on sheep. And sheeps were offered on the Mizbeach. On top of the fact that, as we learned, that the entirety of the Mizbeach was all in the chelik of Binyamin. Binyamin was called by Yaakov Avinu a wolf. Actually, there was no foundation yesod on almost two entire sides of the Mizbeach, according to the way we learn, almost two entire sides on the eastern side and on the northern side. Why? Eastern side and on the southern side, because we wanted the Mizbeach to be on the chelik of Binyamin. So she called the Mizbeach Lukus. Until when? When it comes to consuming Jewish money, you're good for that. You eat up their korbanos. But now that they need you, you're not helping them. So that is what she said, and that is what she did, that she banged with her sandal on the Mizbeach, and she made that statement. So when they heard about that, so they penalized the entire mishmar, as we mentioned. Kavu tabata, they affixed the ring. No longer was that ring able to be used. V'sasmu as chaloina, they sealed the storage window for their chalif knives. And so that's one version. There's another version as to why the entire mishmar was penalized. That mishmartoi shoya lavai. That Bachlal, whenever it was their turn, they would come late. Everyone would come late. Now, they were, like we mentioned, they were, I said the 24th, I take that back. They were the 15th Mishmar from the 24. They were the 15th. The 14th Mishmar was Yeshevav. So says the Gemara that since they came late, so Yeshevav would do their work. The Nichnas Yeshevav Echos Imoi V'Shimish Tachtov. So now continues the Braisa that Afal Pisha Shchene D'Shaim Loi Nistakru. Normally the neighbors of wicked don't benefit. But over here, the neighbors, referring to Yeshevav, the Shchene Bilga did benefit. How did they benefit? Because since, like we mentioned in the Mishnah, that the Mishmar of Bilga La'olam Chelekes B'Darim, they would only get their parts of the Lechem upon him in Darim. So who stayed in Safan? Yeshevav. So not only did Yeshevav get it on their week, when they were Nechneses, like we mentioned, Yeshevav was Mishmar number 14. Even when they were the outgoing, the incoming was Bilga, they still got it in Safan. So here is the anomaly that the neighbors of Bilga benefited. End of Brais. And now asks the Gemara, Bishloim Elamanda Amar, that Mishmarti Shoyalavai, that the reason why the Mishmar was penalized in all of the three, because Bechlal, they would never come on time. It's not about one individual, it's about the attitude of the whole Mishmar. Hainu de Konsinim L'Kol Mishmar. El Elamanda Amar, Miriam Bas Bilga Shemira Dasa. It was because of this Miriam, the woman that became an apostate, Mishum Berate, because of one daughter, because of one member of a whole Mishmar. Kansin and Layla, the entire Mishmar is penalized. So Amar Abaya, yeah. You know why? Because she, when she hit the Mizbeach, she said these words, Lukus, Lukus, Ad Masayat Machala. Where did she get those words from? Like people say that Shusa, the Yanuka, Bishuka, that when you hear words of a child in the marketplace, words that are shocking, who do you think the child heard the words from? Child doesn't speak their own words. It's either the child heard it from the father or heard it from the mother. Parenthetically, now that we're living right before Mashiach, there was never a generation where you have such a gap between one doit and the other because of technology, and most of our kids are very much exposed to it. Today kids pick things up from out there, which never happened before, on the extent that it's happening right now. But in those days, a child, he grew up in your home. So when a child says something very, very not good, it shines a light, not on the child, but on the parents.
Rabbi?
Yes.
How old is this Miriam that we're talking about?
Well, if she got married, then she was a married woman. So Yaakov...
And that's my question. At what point do we say it's not coming from her parents?
In our case, since that she grew up amongst Yevanim, such an expression, as we'll speak from the Rebbe Siyum, she got before she got married. And then she was still considered a child. But you're making a good point. But let's go weiter. So, okay, so it reflects negatively on her family, but it's one family. So, because one family spoke derogatorily about the Mizbeach, the whole Mishmar is going to get penalized. Because so, and that says Abaya, yeah, that's the rule that we learned from Miriam Bas Bilga. It's one family that we're calling them into Rishoyim. But all of their neighboring families, meaning all of the members of the Mishmar of Bilga, they all owe to them as well. And we also learn from Miriam Bas Bilga. We can extrapolate, like Rashi says on the bottom, the Mida, Toiva, Meruba. Since it's true, it's how much more so is it true. Toiv la tzadik, v'toiv l'shchenoi. Shenamar, as it says, Imru tzadik ki toiv. Tell the tzaddik that it's good. We're going to read the final words when we make the same in the shul. But the ending of the verse is in the plural, so tzaddik is in the singular. The last word in the verse is yoichelu, they will eat. They will eat is plural, meaning not only will the tzaddik be rewarded, the tzaddik, but all of the neighbors of the tzaddik will be rewarded as well. Atkan, we finished the Siyum now. I just want to repeat. We have this recorded, the Rebbe Siyum for his mother on Vav Tishrei, Tavshin Lamed Hey. So the Rebbe spoke out the classical questions. The classical questions is that when you're speaking about this Miriam, look at the order of what she did. First, she Hemira es Dasa. Hemira es Dasa is the end, when you convert out. On top of that, we're mentioning the fact that she married not Stam a Goy, which is the end of the end, but she married a Yevani. She didn't just marry the Yevani. When they entered the Beis HaMikdash, she joined them. They came to defile the temple. What are we focusing on? Why is everyone punished? What's wrong with the family? Because of Yaakov Shusa, the Yanuka Beshuka, because of utterance, because of what she said, Lucas. Ad Masai, to take Jewish money, you're good at. But to help a Yid, where are you? So the Rebbe, everyone asks, that is what we're focusing on? At that point, she's completely out of the Jewish people. What she said should be irrelevant. Is that pshat, the whole message is that Bal Yidach Mimeno Nidach. The message that we are learning from Miriam Bas Bilga, true that the Mishmar got punished, but we are learning from her something positive. The fact that she's being taken to account, she and her family and the whole Mishmar, because of a statement that she made after she became an apostate and after she intermarried. If we would consider her to be non-Jewish, out of the community, we would not focus on any word she says. The fact that she's being punished for saying something, it means that we still have expectations of her. Because Takai, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. And even when it's at the end of the world, that she did things for which she's chayiv kares. She entered the temple to be part of the Yevanim's offering of a davar acher on the Mizbeach. She's still a Jew. And what she says is important. And if she says something negative, we'll punish her for that. And furthermore, what did she say? She expected the Mizbeach to help a Jew. And in spite of how far she went away, when she actually saw what was happening in the Beis HaMikdash, she cried out of pain to the Mizbeach, you wolf, to take Yiddish money, you're good. You can't help your fellow Jew. In other words, she also expected for the Mizbeach at that time to help another Yid. In spite of how far she went away, she never gave up her real deep emunah that there is a God, and because of the Mizbeach should protect, and if the Mizbeach is not protecting us, it bothered her. It bothered her to the point that she banged with her sandal on the Mizbeach, and she cried out, Lukus, where are you? Help another Yid. And that's why she merited that taka from her, taka in the negative, that oil rasha v'oil shchenoi. But we learn oil tzadik, toiv tzadik, v'toiv l'shchenoi. And as the Rebbe concluded, and the message for us is that when you go out on the street and you see a Jew that temporarily, because of Golus, is that far away, they became an apostate, they married out, they married the enemy, they are now actively involved in defiling whatever the Beis HaMikdash is today. When you look at them, you can't give up on them. You're going to say, how can I engage with them? Oil rasha v'oil shchenoi. Says the Rebbe, why are you making them into the Iker? Why will you view yourself as their shachen? You be a tzaddik, and you get close to them, you will make them your neighbor. And toiv tzaddik, and v'toiv l'shchenoi. And with that we say that Hadran and Allah will come back to you, Masechta Sukah, and God willing, tomorrow morning we will start the new Masechta, Masechtas Beyom.